The Great War had ended, but peace came with a price that bled Germany dry. Factories stood silent, the mark collapsed, and hunger became the nation's only industry. Every day, prices doubled. Every night, hope was halved. Families carried salaries in sacks, only to trade them for a loaf of bread. The Treaty of Versailles demanded reparations that chained the German economy to an impossible debt. Inflation turned currency into dust. Pride turned to anger. Out of this chaos rose the first question that would haunt a century. Can a nation be rebuilt through illusion? In cafes once filled with laughter, silence took its seat. Teachers, clerks, engineers, the proud middle class, watched their savings vanish overnight. The currency that once built homes could now buy only a meal. Wealth became fiction, survival became arithmetic. Out of despair, extremist voices found ears willing to listen. The soil of poverty grew fertile for demagogues who promised order. When a nation loses its bread, it hungers for belief. In the back rooms of Munich, small groups whispered of rebirth. They spoke not of compassion, but of control, of unity through obedience. To the desperate, such promises sounded like salvation. And within this crucible of ruin, a voice began to rise, a voice that would rewrite the meaning of economic recovery. By 1930, the Great Depression crossed the Atlantic like a second war. Foreign loans vanished, businesses collapsed, and unemployment rose past 6 million. The Republic was dying not from bullets, but from bankruptcy. The world looked away, but one man watched, calculating, a former soldier with no fortune, no education, but a talent for rage. In 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. He did not promise freedom. He promised work. Factories would breathe again, he said. Roads would stretch like arteries across the land. To a nation starving for stability, his words sounded like bread. But this miracle would not be paid with gold. It would be financed with fear. The man who turned debt into devotion was about to perform the greatest illusion in economic history. Germany was on its knees, but within months, the world watched it stand again. The new chancellor promised not theories, but action. Roads, bridges, and factories erupted across the nation like veins of reborn industry. Men who had begged for bread were handed shovels instead. Unemployment plummeted. The press called it a miracle, but few asked who was paying for it. Behind the illusion stood one man, Hjalmar Schacht, the financial architect of recovery. A banker without uniform, he engineered prosperity without money. The secret was simple. If gold was gone, Germany would print faith instead. The government created phantom notes disguised as mefo bills, promises of payment that never truly existed. With invisible money, Hitler built very real roads, tanks, and dreams. To the world, Germany looked reborn: discipline, work, order. The people were told, "We have conquered unemployment." But the jobs were not for peace. They were preparation for war. While farmers plowed fields, soldiers trained. While architects built bridges, factories retooled for weapons. The economy had become a stage set, prosperity on the surface, militarization beneath. Yet the people did not see the deception. They saw parades, uniforms, and paychecks. They felt pride, and pride is the most seductive currency of all. For the first time in years, the German worker could feed his children. But every mark they earned was borrowed from the future, a debt that could only be repaid through conquest. The autobahns became monuments of obedience, the factories cathedrals of production. Propaganda turned work into worship. Banners replaced prayers. The miracle economy was not built on wealth, but on will. And will can move nations, but it can also blind them. By 1936, Germany's unemployment had nearly vanished. The press called it the German wonder. But behind every paycheck was a war plan, and behind every marching song, an equation of death. The illusion of prosperity was complete. The nation was ready to follow wherever its leader would lead. The miracle had worked. Germany was reborn. But what had been resurrected was not peace, but power. Germany's miracle had a heartbeat, a rhythm of factories, foundries, and marching feet. Every spark from the steel mills was a promise of strength. But the promise carried a cost, and the payment would be made in fire. Hitler's economic engine demanded constant motion. Standing still meant collapse. So Germany accelerated towards something it could no longer control. Schacht's phantom money fueled armies now. Tanks replaced tractors, and rearmament replaced recovery. Secret budgets hid inside ministries. New factories rose overnight under military guard. To feed the machine, Germany needed iron, oil, and men, resources it no longer owned. And so, economic necessity became justification for conquest. The nation entered a trance of production. Youth were taught that work was worship and sacrifice was success. Radios sang of destiny, posters proclaimed labor as love. Beneath the anthems, economists whispered of a truth they dared not speak. Germany could no longer afford peace. In 1938, Austria fell, not by invasion, but by invitation. Each conquest brought new mines, new factories, new slaves to keep the illusion alive. The miracle economy had become a pyramid built on stolen stone. And like all pyramids, it demanded endless sacrifice at its base. By 1939, the machine was unstoppable. 6 million men stood in uniform. The factories ran day and night. Germany's debt had tripled, but prosperity blinded the masses. The same citizens who once carried worthless money now carried flags. And when the illusion could no longer be financed, it was sustained by conquest. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. The economic miracle reached its peak and its point of no return. For 6 years, the machine would run on plunder, labor, and blood. The miracle had become a monster. And as Europe burned, the illusion that had promised salvation began to reveal its true cost. The miracle could not last forever. Germany's economy, once hailed as unstoppable, now depended on stolen gold, foreign labor, and conquered lands. What had begun as recovery became a race against reality. The empire needed to expand, or it would collapse under the weight of its own lies. To sustain the illusion, the Reich plundered the wealth of every nation it conquered: banks, art, factories, and lives. The gold reserves of Europe became Germany's lifeline, melted and rebranded as triumph. The economy of war had replaced the economy of men. In the shadow of prosperity, millions worked as slaves, their labor the hidden currency of conquest. For every bridge built, a town burned. For every bullet made, a life was taken. The machine that once promised dignity now consumed it. And still, the propaganda sang, "Work makes you free." But in the camps and factories, men and women worked only for survival. The miracle economy was now built entirely on fear. By 1943, the illusion had begun to crumble. The stolen resources could no longer feed the war. Bombs fell where factories once stood. Cities that symbolized progress became deserts of ash. The mark, once revived, now meant nothing again. Paper burned faster than faith. Even Schacht, the architect of prosperity, warned that the nation had replaced economics with madness. But the machine no longer listened. By 1945, the Reich collapsed, not only militarily, but economically. Entire cities lay in ruins, and what remained of the miracle was debt, destruction, and despair. The Reichsmark was worthless once more, a circle completed in ruin. The same hands that once carried bread lines now carried rubble. The price of the miracle had been revealed. The economy built on illusion could create power, but never peace. What began as a promise of salvation ended as the most expensive lie in human history. And from the ashes of that lie, a new world would rise, one determined to rebuild from both ruin and guilt. The war ended, but the system it created did not die. Beneath the rubble of Berlin, the architecture of control survived, rebuilt not with banners, but with banks. The illusion of prosperity born in crisis became the foundation of the modern world. Nations learned to print what they could not earn, to borrow what they could not build, to promise what they could not keep. In the years that followed, new empires rose, not through conquest, but through credit. America's Marshall Plan rebuilt what bombs had destroyed. Bretton Woods tied nations together with invisible chains of currency. The world swore never again, yet quietly adopted the same principles of illusion: control money, and you control destiny. Economists praised full employment, governments embraced spending, and debt became the new faith of civilization. The methods had changed, the miracle remained. From the ashes of totalitarian control rose something subtler, systems so vast that no one questions who built them. Central banks, interest rates, digital credit, all descendants of the same illusion Schacht once conjured. The machine still runs, only now it hums quietly behind screens and statistics. We no longer forge tanks, we forge algorithms. We no longer march in streets, we march through debt. History remembers the uniforms but forgets the balance sheets. The so-called miracle economy did not vanish, it evolved. Each recession reborn as opportunity, each crisis used to consolidate power. The lessons of the past were not erased, they were perfected. And so the question remains, not how the Nazis built their miracle, but how much of it still lives in us. Every economy begins as a story, and every story needs belief. The mark, the dollar, the euro, all faith wrapped in paper or code. The danger lies not in money itself, but in forgetting that it is an invention, not a law of nature. When a nation begins to worship its illusion, it repeats the same mistake, expecting morality from mathematics. The miracle is gone, but the idea endures that with enough belief, even debt can look like destiny. And as long as nations keep building their prosperity on illusion, history will keep repeating its quiet refrain. Prosperity without truth is only another empire waiting to fall.